living in is a very brave new world where the rules of business are being written and rewritten at the whirlwind pace. Competition today is not so much company to company, but ecosystem to ecosystem. Who you're marshalling together to do what you do, to deliver what you deliver, is how you build your partnerships and ecosystem. Most organizations today have a rich, vibrant, and inclusive ecosystem. And an API ecosystem is one that prefers collaboration over competition, innovation over silos, and it also obviates the trouble of building all of it on your own. Saves time, saves money. And it's the way to go forward in the future in a digital era. Now, while the use of API is on the rise, so are the number of API security breaches. We've seen API vulnerabilities lead to data breaches at organizations like Just Dial, British Airways, T-Mobile, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Clubhouse. The list is long, and so are the threats related to API vulnerabilities. Now, the reason behind this is because the API attacks can be launched in various innovative ways, and that makes it very difficult to detect, predict, and protect against them. And with these two gentlemen and the lady here, we'll try and understand what can organizations do to secure their APIs. So we'll start off with you, Nikhil. Nikhil, you represent the manufacturing industry. And a research that was conducted last year across different industry verticals, it included verticals like banking and financial services, energy and utility, e-commerce and retail, state and government bodies. And it was found out that among all of these, manufacturing was also a part of it, the manufacturing industry has seen more API security incidents than any other vertical this past 1 year. In fact, that number stands at 79% for manufacturing companies. So what are the common API-related threats that you've seen in the manufacturing industry?
So firstly, I look at it this, sorry, I'm hearing myself. I look at it this, it's a twofold problem. One, it is a people problem, and then it is a threat. People create those threats, and that is how I look at it. If we start with the threat piece, there are various threats that we are seeing from the industry perspective. Not only manufacturing, but the industry is seeing those.
Do you hold the mic closer, please?
Yeah. Seeing multiple threats. Threats like you have the DDoS attacks, rate limiting attacks, cross-site scripting attacks, and these attacks are really created when a developer puts in the applications into the production without aligning with the security. So I think this problem has to be solved on both the places.
Right, so it's more of a collaboration, communication, and transparency level problem that you
Absolutely,
see.
yeah.
That's where it stems from.
Yeah.
Right, right. That's a very important aspect that needs to be covered because it shouldn't get overlooked. Technology is not the real problem. It's a problem that stems from people working in silos, lack of collaboration and communication among different business units. That's a very critical aspect of securing APIs. Now, Babitha, I'd like to understand from you, we are moving towards the era of bionic banking, data-led banking, banking 4.0, where data is going to be a very critical asset for banks. Now, if data is the new oil, APIs are the pipelines. And if you're talking about securing APIs, it's important to have a continuous visibility and monitoring over your API consumption to then be able to secure it. Now, that said, that becomes difficult because with the need for manual audit, there's a challenge around the rising cost of security experts. Also, the API attack surface is ever increasing. So how can banks solve these twin challenges?
Thank you for this wonderful question, because API security is biggest concern when a CISO is concerned. all the connection to the cloud or external world is now through API. And one of our earlier speaker was highlighting about the shadow API. Are we really aware of all the APIs which is available in our organization? Many of the APIs, there are APIs which can be even used for internal purposes, which may not be even made public, but it will be used. And there are which are published to the public. So visibility, when it comes to security, visibility is what we actually require, because we can secure only those things which we know. Without that, we cannot look into what is happening and we can put a control over that. Whenever we talk about API security, we mainly focus on the key exchange, how key exchange is happening, how far it is secured, or what is how the authentication is happening. But these are the only basic things which we have to consider when we go for API security. But there are many more things that is hidden in the API security. API is nothing but an application only, and the threat or the part in which we have to look into, because is whenever we are having an API, we are expecting a reply or a response data from the other end. When it comes to an application, we may not be. So what is coming from the other side? That parameter, we have to look deep into the parameter. What is the parameter which is we have asked for, and whether that is the right form of the data format we are receiving. So for example, when we are considering an API for a banking, we might ask for a parameter, might be a text format for a account number. So in the text format, any kind of data can be coming. If some fraudsters, because in many cases it will be a targeted kind of attack when we focus on APIs and all. So if they embed some malware in the request, are we able to identify that? So for that only we come up with the API integrating solutions, wherein they will scan for the OWASP top 20 vulnerabilities. But now there is a concept of API top 20. Not only the OWASP top 20, it is the API top 20 which have to look into, which is specific to the targeting attacks of API. So how far that solution is capable? That there's misconfigured. That just by having the solution doesn't work. Are we configuring it in the right way? Or are we testing are you asking them to do all the configuration for the top 20? That also makes sense. So API is really very critical, because all our workloads are now moving towards cloud. And all the integrations is through API. And the focus to the API is of a great concern to us. And the tokenization and the key management, that is also very important. There should be a central key management solution wherein the keys are exchanged in a way it have to be. So all these are some of the things, key points we have to keep in mind before we open our API. And the API registry, how we are going to create the visibility of the API. What technology we have to. So we have to run a discovery kind of thing across the environment, because there might be some APIs which may not be used now, but it would have been in use earlier. Now the application, may not be using that application, but still that API will be kept open to the public, and we may not be monitoring it because we are not using it. They are the pain points or through which the fraudsters can get into the system. So we should be very careful when we are dealing with APIs.
Tokenization, API keys, discovery of APIs, real-time monitoring, real-time visibility and identification is very critical, like you highlighted. Now, I'd like to move on to you, Navneet. Navneet, given the fact that 80% of the internet traffic runs through APIs, it becomes a very lucrative target for the cyber criminals to exploit the API-related vulnerabilities. What also contributes to the problem is that a lot of organizations have this false sense of security and overconfidence when it comes to API protection. What are some of the typical challenges that you see organizations facing with API security? Can you give us an industry perspective here?
Sure. Thanks, Sneha. So just taking a step back and understanding where we stand in terms of API, overall API economy. As per 2022 reports, India is number 2 in terms of API consumption, and I'm sure in 2023 we will bridge that gap. So if you look at the top 2, it is US and India, and the other 8, combining them together, will not be able to cover that gap. Now, yes, 80% of the organizations or more than that are consuming or transacting through APIs. The typical challenges that we see is one, as ma'am highlighted, uh, the organizations find it very difficult to have their API inventory in place, because for that you need to understand your internal APIs that you are running, the external APIs, the third parties that you are using. So a lot of things that goes around it. So one is definitely discovering those APIs. For enterprises, the next challenge is how they can deliver the consistent security for the APIs in a hybrid environment, and that is what we see customers are running in multi-cloud, data center and hybrid environments. So consistency whenever any tool is used is very important, how it can be delivered. The other set of problem which we have seen very common is the ownership of API security. So in organizations that we talk to, in some of them, their InfoSec team is taking care of API security. In some of them, there is a dedicated application security team who's doing it. Then there is a DevOps team or platforms teams, those who are dealing with the actual APIs. So it is very highly distributed, and no ownership that we see is taken within the organization in that sense. So definitely they need to identify who's going to own it, and then take it forward.
And that kind of
from that perspective.
substantiates the point that Nikhil made earlier in terms of collaboration, communication. It has to be a proper unified communication around it, right?
Exactly.
Perfect. Now, what I'd like to understand from you, Nikhil, is so Nikhil, I'd like to understand from you that given the API explosion that we've seen, the increase in automated pipelines, the movement to cloud, microservices, has also brought in an explosion of secrets that are needed to secure APIs. How do you see organizations dealing with that challenge?
So, if I take the point forward from Babitha and my friend here,
Could you hold the mic closer, please?
if I take their point forward, I think it is important to start where the problem is. I'll again go back to my first statement. Get your developers trained onto security training platforms that can give them an understanding how to protect these secrets, and also how to ensure that you follow the security best practices while developing. That would be number one. Now, when we talk about how can we protect the secrets, there are definitely various solutions available in the market that can help you do that. One example could be secret management systems that you can implement, harden it to an extent, police it to an extent that only authorized users and APIs can get to it, employ secret scanning tools on your repositories to ensure that you can identify if any, by mistake, if any keys have got exposed to the public.
Right. Now, the other important aspect that I would want to touch upon with you, Babitha, is that, we are seeing that open banking is a big opportunity for banks and financial institutions to boost their revenue, to grow their revenue in various innovative ways. And APIs power the open banking ecosystem. So what is it that banks should do so that they can improve the API security and also provide a safe open banking environment to their customers?
See, when we talk about the open banking or open APIs which are available for others, vendors to connect to or payment gateways which we work with. See, when we are going for something for the ease of operation, there is always a pain for security. Okay, we are opening these APIs and asking anyone can come to my environment, access this API. I will be giving the methodology with which you can do, or what are the parameters you have to give for this function call. Based on that, it works. But actually, it should be like, I don't think in the banking sector we will be so lenient for that. We will be having a thorough authorization mechanism wherein we will be authorizing the person who want to connect to the API, and based on that only we are allowing them to do that. But when this authorization mechanism is kept in place, we have to depend on the knowledge of the person who is giving the authorization. Okay. If he is not, or he or she is not capable enough to understand what are the basic things that need to be well defined before we give the actionable, or we can give our share our API, there is no point in doing that. This is just a mechanical or process that we will be following, and the security will be left out. And whether it is an open API or the other API, whatever security measures we have to take, we have to consider that. Without that, because API is going to be a very, very big challenge when it comes to security. So we should be very careful, especially even the traffic, whether it is the inward traffic or the external. Sometimes we will be thinking, okay, they are accessing the data outward. We are just sharing the data. There is no request coming to our end. So all those things, whether we are giving the access rights in the right way only, all those things, what are the basic things we need for the security applies to the API, and that should be strictly followed.
Right, absolutely. Now, Navneet, I'd like to understand from you, how do you go about securing APIs in the era of CI/CD framework to make sure that the time to market does not get impacted for business?
Yeah, so I think that's a very critical point for business, that their time to market should not be impacted with whatever people, process and technology that you combine to deliver those services. And with APIs and the changes, the frequency of changes that are happening to the application, it is on a daily basis, maybe in few organizations it is hourly basis which is happening. So you don't have the luxury of having the required testings in place where you can plug all the gaps and then release it. So you need to have the tools and solution which can provide you the runtime security, provide you the runtime visibility in terms of discovering anything new that is happening in your environment, anything that is stale. As ma'am said, that there could be unused APIs which may be running in your environment, which is a very high risk potential threat, because in an API breach, it's a straight away data breach. There is nothing in between that exists. So that is something that the tool should have a capability to discover, provide the visibility to organization in a runtime, to be able to fix it in a runtime, and capability that it brings along with artificial intelligence, machine learning, leveraging the cloud intelligence, whatever they can have, so they can identify it quickly and deliver a secure channels to it. So that's how, in terms of CI/CD, you need to continuously keep delivering the service and have the security which can take care on its own, rather than taking it through a lengthy cycle of testings and fixing the issues.
Right. So, quick thoughts from both of you here, Nikhil and Babitha. While you're working in the API ecosystem, in this API economy, third-party risk assessment becomes very critical, because you don't want to invite any threat into your organization because of your third parties. So you can't, and besides, you can't do anything beyond third-party risk audits and reports. So how do you solve for that challenge? There's no silver bullet to it, but your thoughts on this?
See, whenever we come to the audit of a third party, we have to either have a on-location audit, which is very rarely happens if it is a cloud solution, public cloud, which wherein we have to go with the audit report, which has been shared. So it is only bluntly because we have to follow what has been written in the audit report, and we have to go for it. So that is one of the pain point, which is always a third party risk which is involved, and now you know the kind of supply chain attack, and the concentration of workload is also going more into the cloud, which will be an influencing point for the fraudsters to attack the cloud rather than coming to individual organizations. So we should be very careful with that, and how to audit is again a question.
If I can just add to Babitha, I mean, apart from the audit reports that are submitted or the controls findings that are submitted, it is also important to get it validated, whether those controls are actually being followed by the vendor or the third party or not. Primarily because they may say that, okay, I secure my APIs keys in, say, these systems, but then you may probably come to know that the APIs are hard-coded into the code. So validation is very important.
Right. Now, quick closing comments from each of you, 30 seconds by the clock. Given the fact that APIs can be hacked in various ways, how should organizations go about securing them? Any best practices that you can share, starting from the design, development, testing, staging to continuing into the production level?
For me? Oh, okay. So first of all, I would start by saying that organizations should break the myth that they will have a single solution which can cover them all. That is the first thing I would request. Key steps, if I have to highlight, it should start first with your environment and the security needs. For example, you only want to cover your north-south traffic, basically your externally exposed APIs, or do you want to cover your east-west traffic as well? Because there are certain organizations, those who have requirement for east-west traffic as well. Then you should have a proper, I would say, set of documentation, procedures in place. And you should standardize it. We have seen in the environments that every different applications or development team within the organizations, they are using different tool sets.
Right.
So one should be the standardization. Then you should have a API testing tool sets, and then bringing in the capability to identify the zero-day threats, not just the vulnerabilities.
Nikhil, very quickly, your best practices.
Yeah, I think apart from all these technical solutions that we try to implement, putting a guardrail and governance process around it is also important, so that somebody does not do something that invites the
Puts
hacker
you in
to
harm's
your
way.
doors.
Right, Babitha?
In one word, secure by design. Like at all stages, we have to follow the security right from the development and the disbursement, and we have to continue the cycle now and then, so that we ensure that what we are have to do is in place.
Right, absolutely. Now APIs can become the biggest security blind spots of the digital era of the API economy. So we need to exercise a lot of caution, a lot of care in trying to secure our APIs. With that, I think we will have to close this. I can see a lot of hungry, impatient faces in the audience. So thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for sitting through this session. And I would want you to give a thunderous round of applause for my speakers, please.